Hello guys, Sue Jerry speaking. Welcome to LJPCBM episode number 1174, and today we're reacting to Per Roads Podcast episode number 97. Stephanie, the Bergeron, I think that's her last name, who's now working with Helpsters. She's Prairie Dawn as of now, because replacing Frank Brill, who's the original Prairie Dawn at the time, and who she retired now at the time, because she was Zoe and Prairie Dawn when she was voicing when she was performing these two, but Jennifer Barnett and Stephanie Barnes, will be betraying her, betraying them respectively, just to let you know. What I'm reacting to today is episode 97, Per Rose Podcast, and somehow I cannot find my charger anywhere. Hang on, be right back. Anyways, I'm back. I just cannot find the right charge of my iPad. Anyway, it was stolen because I didn't know what to do, but the LG react must go on. But anyway, we're gonna react to episode 97, beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm Terry Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I've played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show, Barney and Friends. Now, my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Terry Stinson, and this is Purple Roads.
Okay.
Welcome to Purple Roads. My name is Carrie Stinson, and as always, I'm thrilled you're here. This is such a cool episode. We have Stephanie D'Abruzzo, who is a puppeteer, an actress, singer. She's done so much. She's been with Sesame Street. She was with Avenue Q. Get ready. This is going to be so much fun. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm all right, Carrie. How are you doing today?
I am great and just thrilled you'd be on here. We tried to do this a little bit, and you were so busy. I appreciate you taking the time to get on the show.
Yeah, you reached out right before I was starting another season of production on Helpsters.
Which, by the way,
yeah.
If you watch this remix, for you, buddy, but that's why I'm trying to let you know, because Helpsters is a Sesame Workshop program from Apple TV Plus. I've never seen some episodes of Helpsters yet, but that's just me. Continue on.
Which is definitely one of the shows we want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. For those of you who don't know, Helpsters on Apple TV Plus. You can see seasons 1 and 2 right now if you are a subscriber.
Yeah, though I am an Apple TV Plus subscriber because I've never seen some of the first season and the whole second season, but I wanted to see what's going on in the first and second season. This again because it's gonna be huge. Continue on.
There's also Helpsters Help You, which was a pandemic show I did actually.
Wow, I've never seen that yet. Continue on.
My apartment, and that's on YouTube. So
okay.
If you want to get a taste of Helpsters.
YouTube. I have to watch that. Continue on.
You can see it for free.
You know, that's one of the things that's amazing. It's how we all adjusted during this pandemic.
Yeah.
And we're able to pull things like that off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm always amazed. I don't think that 5 years ago the technologies that we had would have supported it.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to, I hadn't heard of Zoom, and I don't think many people were using Zoom the way they do it now. I don't think our laptops were as robust.
Or Discord, which I use nowadays. Continue on.
Able to handle all the RAM and memory and all the gigabytes of video flowing in and out. So, if it was going to happen, can you imagine if this happened in 1985? I can't fathom in an analog era.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very fortunate that I was able to keep working and contributing.
Yes.
Well, we were doing this show in a studio when this happened,
Okay.
and I remember the same thing and the same thing. I had heard of Zoom, and I thought, well, let's try this. And next thing you know, we set up basically a studio in my house, and there I've done 70 something episodes from my house.
Yeah.
And it works out actually pretty great.
Wow.
It sure does. It sure does.
Well, and I know you probably get this a lot, but I do kind of want to start from the beginning with you and all the things that you've done. Did you know from a young age that you wanted to be an entertainer?
I know I was always a little bit of a ham. I mean, I was singing on my swing set and listening to Sesame Street records and sitting on the edge of my bed and holding the little album covers and reading them because Sesame taught me how to read. And I loved to sing and perform whenever I could. But that said, I wasn't an outgoing person in class. Like, I wasn't the one who would always raise her hand. But if we did little, like I was in the reading group that would put on little, you'd read the plays that were in the readers. And because I could read well, I was always the narrator. But I knew that I wanted to play characters. But I didn't have the language to express that. Everyone would say, oh, you're such a good reader. You should be the narrator because there are more words. Which was fine. I couldn't comprehend at that time that I was being asked to be a storyteller. I just thought, well, that's just me. I don't want to be me. I want to be someone else. And it took a really long time for me to be able to grasp how to go about performing. And I was lucky to go to a public school that had good arts programs. So by the time I got to high school, I had the opportunity to do quite a bit of theater. But it wasn't something that, it's not like we had money to take acting lessons. But when the library had their free summer program of doing readers theater, I did that. Any opportunity I had to do something like that wasn't going to cost us anything, I did. But I never thought of it as a career. I just knew that I wanted to do it. Growing up in the 70s, even though it was a very liberating time for women, it was still very much I'll probably wind up working in an office making coffee for someone. And then in the 80s thinking, well, then maybe I'll work in advertising. You still always thought of work as office. Or, or you were a teacher. I mean, I knew that I wasn't science-minded. I knew I wasn't going to go into medicine. I knew I wasn't gonna want to be a lawyer. So I just thought, oh well, what are the opportunities for someone who does well in school? You work in an office, because being an actor, that's what people who starved in New York did. Why would I want to do that?
Wow.
So I was lucky that when I was in high school, I auditioned for and got into a very competitive program called the Pennsylvania Governor's School for the Arts. It's now defunct, but it was a 6-week summer program that was very intensive in theater. And a really great thing and a really unfortunate thing came out of it. The unfortunate thing was it challenged my little untraveled 16-year-old mind. I could not wrap my little head around method acting. I always just dove into whatever characters I did, which wound up being a good thing down the line, but at the time, that wasn't what this program was about. So I felt like I had failed in that program, but what it did help me do is focus on other things. And in high school, I did a lot of activities. I was in forensic speech and debate. So as I was regrouping going into my senior year of high school, I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do with my life? Hey, maybe broadcast journalism. So, for a myriad of reasons that I won't get into now, I applied early decision to Northwestern University and was lucky enough to get in. And when it came time to choose a major, there was the then School of Speech, Radio, TV, Film Department, and the famous Medill School of Journalism. And I thought, well, I don't want to write for a newspaper, so maybe majoring in radio, TV, film would be what I should major in. And but I had never touched a camera instead of except the little Kodak disc instant camera. I'd never touched a camcorder. I'd never made movies. But I thought, well, I'll figure it out when I get there. It was the greatest mistake I ever made in my life because I fell in love with production, and it turned out to encompass all of the things that I enjoyed about performing and creating and writing. I lived in a residential college for all 4 years of my undergrad life, where I found a community of like-minded souls. It was like a creative fraternity, and that's where I came to the decision that I wanted to become a Muppet performer. Not just a puppeteer. I wanted to become a Muppet performer.
Wow.
What's the difference?
Well, I didn't want to do kids' birthday parties.
Okay.
I wanted to learn character and comedy performance that was done through a channel that was not my face.
Wow.
Puppetry appealed to me because I could play anything I wanted to play, and it didn't matter what I looked like. And I say this coming to you with no makeup on in a studio, but we got to be brave once in a while.
Yeah.
I learned in college what being typed out was. That you wouldn't get a role simply because you were too short, too fat, too tall, too this, too that. Puppetry allowed me to do anything without this mattering. And Muppets and Sesame Street were doing that better than anyone. And those were the performers that I grew up with and were inspired by in my childhood for different reasons. And then as I started watching them as a college student, I really started seeing the variety in performance, the way they approached characters, the way they approached comedy. That's who I wanted to learn from. I didn't necessarily know how to build puppets. I built my own puppets in college just so I could learn how to do them and create my own characters. But I didn't really have a strong desire to hang out my shingle and go out on the road and put on little puppet shows. I knew I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to learn from the best. It was the characters. I wanted to play characters that were different from me through this medium, through this channel.
Okay.
So that's what got me into that area of the world. It was the opportunities for acting that I wasn't going to have in a 5'2" body with my hair, my face, my shape.
It's fascinating. Was Sesame Street one of those specific goals, or was it just puppeteering in general?
I mean, at that time, the Jim Henson Company had all 3 character groups under one roof. So really, it was working for Henson.
Okay.
Sesame Street offered the most opportunities for new performers to come in. And when I had my first audition, it was because they were looking for women after Camille Benara announced that she was going to be stepping back from puppeteering. And she was a major performer, not just with the Muppets, but mostly on Sesame Street. Sesame Street had annual production every year. Henson was doing a lot of other stuff too, and I did get to work on other Henson projects. But Sesame, at that time, and now to some degree, that really was where the newbies came in and got their camera time. That was the boot camp. When you were doing other projects, they didn't have time to train people. You had to come in ready. So Sesame Street, and I'm not knocking Sesame Street. I would have loved to work on Sesame Street, but really for me, even though I had thought about children's television as a career route when I was in college as well, I also didn't want to be limited to the kinds of characters that I could play. And I knew that if I just said, I just want to do children's television, because again, at that time, Muppets was doing things that were for a broader audience.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to limit the kinds of characters I could play to appealing to, such a narrow age range. But I love, and I love Sesame Street.
Same here.
It was just one of the things I wanted to do.
Well, it's fascinating because, obviously with Barney, we went for a younger audience, and that was it. We weren't trying to entertain adults or anything of that nature. So Sesame Street's always been a little bit more, and then obviously the Muppets are a lot more, as you're mentioning. And we've had John Tartaglia on here.
Yeah.
and we've had Matt Vogel, and I actually got to work with Carol Spinney, which was one of the absolute highlights of my career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, you mentioned these two. John Travolta, which is a tribute to Alex Trebek, who passed away in 2020. And Matt Vogel, which, by the way, I mentioned these two in LJPCBM form. Continue on.
Was it hard for you going back and forth? Because I was even watching your reel, and I know it's heavy children, so it's like I don't just do children's TV.
Well,
I do other things too. Is that hard for you to go back and forth?
hard how? You mean?
Well, you're doing Avenue Q, which is obviously for adults.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get your mindset into it? Okay,
no, I approach all my characters the same way.
Okay.
I approach them strictly as whether that's an animated character or working with this face or a puppet character, it's a character. It's just the words that are different. And when the only time that comes into play is when you have to improvise in character for, say, a press event, or when you're, noodling between scenes, or in the middle of something. When I work on Helpsters, we there are moments where we're given a bit of a leash where we can maybe throw in a little something here, or we have a lot of guest stars before they come, when they come in and between takes, we're playing with them. You have to know when to hit the censor button in your brain. But again, you have to know every character is going to be different. What a character would say on those down times is going to be different from character to character to character. So you just have to be mindful of which character you're playing. I've played so many characters that, again, going back to why I couldn't do method, it's best that maybe I didn't have to think for a half hour and get into character, because I can switch from character to character, know what that character would say, how they would say it, and what they can't say or shouldn't say. Now, sometimes, you're a little too funny in between takes, and you mess up, and you maybe say something that you shouldn't, but we all do. And but going, it's not hard. Like and it's a question that I get asked more often than you think. Like, is it hard to do children's and non-children's entertainment? And the hardest thing about children's entertainment is that you have to do more with less vocabulary. I feel that way, especially I've started to do more writing, and I've written for Nature Cat and Don Quixote and an episode of Helpsters, and it's fascinating because people have this stigma about children's entertainment. They think it's easier to write. It is much, much more difficult to write, because it's not, when you say there are words you can't use, yes, the obvious words you can't use, but you will be challenged on a word that seems innocuous, or someone will say, kids won't understand that, or the way that they say it, or even for, when you're dealing with a show that's going to have an international audience, plays on words, or dealing with kids who are on the spectrum, and they don't understand sarcasm, irony, things that are used in other, humorous things we would use for humor for other audiences. You have to really simplify some of that. So you have to do more with less. Which is a challenge, and it's a good challenge. It's a great challenge. But people just think, oh, is it hard not to swear?
Wow.
It's not hard to swear.
No, but and you're exactly, I'm glad you pointed out, because it really is the other part. It's the hard part about it. Is it what they're going to understand? And what your audience, is it the little ones?
Right.
Is it in between? Obviously, they're going to learn a little bit more. I had to learn a real responsibility to it, and I understand that with all characters. But playing Barney, I could never be. When you're that character, right? You can't be sad. You can't be evident, because those kids, boy, he's real.
Yes.
He's real, and those characters that you bring to these kids shows are that way too. Have you had a chance? Do you get to do a public appearance or hospital visits or things of that nature where you get to see some of your audience?
No, no. The characters that I play on Sesame Street aren't, of that level of popularity. I would get a sense of it when we would, before COVID, when we could have visitors come to the set We would have Make-A-Wish kids, or friends of other people who worked on the show would bring their kids, and it's fun to see different kids' reactions to it. Puppets especially. They're not every kid is cool with a puppet, and because the puppet's head is bigger than the kid's head, and their eyes are 10 times as big as their eyes, and it's different when it's on a screen. It's right in your face. That can be a lot for some kids, but other kids, and this is something that I knew when I was in college, when I would try my characters out to my friends in the dorm, they'd stop looking at me. They would look at the character. That's when I knew I was doing something right, when I was teaching myself how to do this. The kids will be the same at Sesame. You can be right there with the puppet, and if you're engaging, if that character is real, if you have put your heart and soul and skill and craft into that character, they're not looking at this, they're looking at this, which is great. But yeah, we know we have a responsibility. We don't take it lightly. I don't think that anybody comes into Sesame Street thinking, I'm gonna sabotage this place, I'm gonna shake it down. Like, why would you do that? That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what the audience is, but you also know you're serving up curriculum, you're serving up character, and you're part of an institution that goes back to, certainly more than my whole life. I grew up with the show, and even outside of the puppets, I was a fan of Bob and Emilio and Roscoe and Loretta and Sonia and all the human cast. So you know that you're contributing to a legacy.
Yes.
And we don't. Also, a lot of us are Muppet nerds. We're fans of the show too. So we care about that legacy. We care about carrying it forward. And I think that any personality who would come in thinking otherwise, like, I'm going to change Sesame Street, I don't think they would have a good time.
Yeah.
No. It's amazing. It was amazing talking to Matt Vogel, because hearing his part of, oh my gosh.
He's such a, we and I came up together. I mean, we were auditioning at the same time. And Johnny too. He came in a little after me, but yeah.
It's fascinating to hear all the behind the scenes and on creating these characters. And I was telling him the story, and I'll tell you, on Carol Spinney, I did it was when the Sprout Network came up. We did a promotion together. So you're in Washington D.C. It's a press conference, different anchors, and then you're in in Dallas, and then you're in Kentucky, and so I getting a feel for him, and of course I grew up with him, so I'm already just starstruck meeting him, and it just means the world to me. And so we're working, and we've done a couple of them, and I forget the next city we're in. And Big Bird looks off camera and starts talking to Oscar the Grouch.
Wow.
Obviously he's not there.
Right.
He is obviously doing both characters now. And now so I pick up into this, and he is pulling off so many things. I am absolutely blown away. As I'm going through this.
Wow.
And it's interesting as you keep talking about character, because that's part of what I was thinking. Forget about the puppeteer. I mean, he had mastered that, obviously, at this point. Working two characters at the same time, plus the other things, working with me, and which we had just met. And then, obviously, we're talking to an anchor in different cities. It's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And I have told that story. And I've heard other stories of things like that he's done that kind of stuff. When you go on to that show and some of these other shows, but let's talk about Sesame for a second, and that legacy, did you feel that coming in?
Of course. I mean, I remember my first day working alongside Marty Robinson and Carol, and for meeting Jerry Nelson for the first time, and again the human cast. But I mean, all of those puppeteers, some whose names were on that album that I was reading the cover of when I was singing along with the records. I mean, it's still unfathomable to me sometimes that those names became my friends. I mean, I got to meet everyone except Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. Everyone else in that, and and Joe Raposo had already passed away, but my first, not my first day with John Stone, but I got to work with John Stone a couple of times. He would never have remembered my name, but I still got to work with John Stone. I met Jeff Moss once. I mean, just to meet these people, and then eventually to really get to know the writers, Tony Geis and people who'd been there from the beginning, Chris Surf and Norman Stiles, and these legends, these people who built the show, and then the puppeteers and the crew. I mean, Frankie Biondo, Camera One since 1969, Dick Maitland, audio since 1969. That's mind blowing when you think about that. I still, whenever I see Bob McGrath, it's like, I know Bob. We invited Bob when my husband turned 40. We had a party for him.
Which by the way, I was became friends with Bob McGrath since 2014, and Jeremy Main, a fan of Sesame Street, and I still became friends with Bob McGrath until his passing in 2022. Bob McGrath, I still miss Bob to this day when his son said, Bob McGrath passed away, and Jeremy May told the Post, I was in deep shock, and my friend Jeremy May and I, were breaking the news, especially to my husband's Facebook group, saying that we lost Bob McGrath earlier today, and I told him on the 25 KBR TV's Discord server, not Discord server, but the Sunday Show thing on the 25, stating that, and spent like $10 in this thing, and boy, I was so not happy with the news. I was lucky to become his friend on social media for 8 years. And it was a general soul for me. And the only time knowing Bob McGrath is that I am seeing your work, and that was basically it. Because I haven't talked to him ever since. I miss him. That was it. Continue on.
Bob was at his birthday party.
Wow.
It's ridiculous when you think about that. That wasn't anything that I set out to do. When I was little, I remember saying I wish I could take a vacation to Sesame Street. There are times I still feel like I won a contest. The fact that these people they were my, even the people who aren't there anymore, who are no longer with us, they were in my lives, and they were on my Christmas card list, and they knew my name. The first time Roscoe and Emilio said my name, Gordon and Louise know my name. It's just, and then you work with them, and that's a whole other relationship. Then, and that took a little while for me to feel like they were really my coworkers. You want to not be a tourist when you're working on Sesame Street. You want to play it cool.
Yeah.
But it still takes a while to not feel like the new kid. And as long as I've been there, sometimes I do still feel like the new kid. But when you're in the trenches and you're working, and then you're asking, you're not asking the questions, what was it like to work on this show? You're asking, oh, is this monitor in your way? Oh, is my elbow in your way? Do you need me to move? That's the down and dirty.
Right.
Or the timing of a scene, and getting to bounce off of my heroes is amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the coolest thing. I got to meet Roscoe, and I met Mr. McFeely.
Oh, wow.
And
Well, Mr. McFeely, okay, which I reacted to before I know to react. Continue on.
the fact that they, when I watched them all as kids, and then you meet them, and they're as nice as you hoped maybe that they would be, it's one of the coolest things. Doing this show, I've never met anyone that's just not the nice. There's something about kids' entertainment that everyone's just really nice people.
Well, I think it definitely weeds out the bad seeds. I think that people, there might be one or two people who pass through the world thinking, oh, this is going to be an easy gig, and they realize it's just not a good fit. Because for whatever reason, they either think it's going to be an easy job or an easy paycheck, or oh, how hard could this be? You know, either they don't get to that point or they don't want to stay in that world. They want to do other things.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's not for everyone. And I don't say that to be like, I'm so superior because I work for the purity of the children.
Wow.
It's the gig I can get. Because if you're doing television puppetry, for the most part, most of the jobs are going to be in preschool television.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a fact.
That's it.
With the exception of the Disney Muppets, for the most part. I've gotten to do a couple of things outside of it, doing the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, doing that backpack on that, doing a couple of things on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. But for the most part, you know, that's where it, if you're a lumberjack, that's where the trees are. And so you do it. And thankfully, I had the training in college. The few theater classes I was allowed to take as a non-theater major at Northwestern were all in children's theater, storytelling, creative drama, taught by a Corponing Cup winner and a legend in the world of storytelling and children's theater, Reeves Collins. And I learned very early on to respect the audience, to not think of them as kids, to treat them as people, so that the characters could be appealing to anyone. Make that character as true and appealing to a wide audience, and you'll get the kids, and you'll get the parents, and everybody in between.
Yes.
But it's not so much about talking to kids or writing for kids, it's writing about kids, or understanding the kids, or knowing what they need, but never talking down, never acting like you're doing yippity-dippity-dippity-doo. And that's what I'm constantly doing. And constantly striving to do, and do things that are different or unexpected. I'm always trying to just break that mold of what people think of when they think of a preschool puppet character, and also a preschool puppet character played by a woman.
Well, let's talk about that since you brought that up. Do you, has it gotten easier as a woman being in this industry?
I mean, I can't really gauge that because I can only speak to my experience, and I don't know whether it's the world changing or me getting older and more experienced, and now I have a reputation with more credits, you know, but at the same time, I always feel like I'm hustling for everything. So, yeah, there are a lot of female performers out there. A lot of them work on Sesame Street, and that's amazing. But when you see a photo of the core representation of Sesame Street, it still is mostly male. But hey, it was that female audition, you know, the audition specifically looking for women, that got me in. So the attempt, you know, they've been trying, they're working on that. They're working on representation in many other areas as well. That's always been the case. It's just about finding those people, and sometimes you're looking for unicorns, but you have to find the unicorns, and that takes time. I mean, there are a lot of elements of showbiz. You know, you can only audition for the parts that are written for. So you can't even say, oh, just Sesame Street, or oh, just puppetry. You have to look at media in general, and the roles that are out there, and then the roles that are being written for non-celebrities.
Okay.
You know, I auditioned for voiceovers, and it is a very celebrity-driven world. So there are a lot of roles out there for women, but maybe not for women who don't have household names. Right? So it's really hard for me to gauge what is, you know, just because I'm not getting work doesn't mean, or just because I am getting work, you can't equate those two and paint with a broad brush.
One of the things I noticed when I was going back and I was looking at a lot of your work, the boy, all the different character voices that you do. I mean, it was very impressive. It was very impressive from the puppets, but also the animated, and then it went into the. I was watching your reel, actually, all the commercials as well. I was like, wow.
Oh, thank you.
Are you coming up with? And obviously, I've worked with voice actors, but I'm curious on your process. Are you coming up with these? Or is it come from seeing the character, or does it work together?
In the best case scenario, it comes from seeing what the character looks like. Yeah, I always like to say, especially at a place like Sesame Street, it's a beautiful marriage between the writer, the puppet shop, and the performer when it comes to really giving that character its full life and beauty. And sometimes you see it, and sometimes you just see a drawing. You don't even see the puppet.
Yes.
You just know. And sometimes you have to put on that puppet and you play with a couple of things. At Sesame Street, most of the things I do are one-off walk-on characters, and you don't see that character until you're there on the set, and you're like, oh, which one is the? Oh, okay, great, and you look at it, and then you think about what the lines are. You the night before, or 2 nights before, you're looking at the script and you're thinking, what could I do vocally with this? And then you see the puppet, and you either have to throw that out the window, or oh yeah, this really works. And then sometimes you'll come with an idea, and a producer will say, yeah, maybe not that, or oh, could you try a little younger, or oh, could you maybe tweak that. So you always have to be ready. And I also like to surprise myself. I don't like to be too repetitive with what I do, so I play with voices when I'm at home, and I try to find new placements for things, and think about, oh, what could I use this for? Or just because I like to shake it up.
I thought that was what was impressive, is that some of them were close, but they were distinct.
Well, now there's something that I try to tell people, that you can use the same part of your voice for a character, but then if you're adding cadence to it, or the rhythm of the way they speak, or the intelligence that they're bringing, or the naivete that they're bringing to a scene, how smart are they?
Yes.
All of those things. It's not just the voice. It's the breathing and the performance and a million other things in the air. So that, yeah, you can have two characters that sound similar, but they're acted and performed differently. And that's when they become unique. And people love to say, oh, I could tell that was you because I could hear Kate Monster in there. And I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, but don't be confused, because it's not Kate Monster. I think people like to feel like it's a game that they're winning when they can recognize, I knew that was you because I can hear Kate.
Wow.
But it's not. But what are you going to do? I like to think that they mean it as a compliment, so I try to take the compliment and hear the compliment.
Oh, I absolutely think they do. People just don't realize how much that goes into these things.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
they think anyone can do. Well, and as I've often said, anything that someone does well looks easy. An athlete, look at the Olympians right now. They make it look so easy. Millions of people around the world are looking at the figure skating saying, well, yeah, I bet I could do that. Or they suddenly become experts in whatever event is on, in gymnastics. Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous how we let ourselves believe that because someone so skilled makes it look so easy that we think we could do it like that.
Well, I know, and we don't understand how long it took also.
Right.
How much practice over the years, and how you get so good at things. Back to the other thing for 1 second, because I'm really curious about this. So we're talking about the voice, but we're also, because you really have me thinking about the movement of the puppet, right? If it's fast.
Yeah.
Is that coming first on or do you get the voice and they go, okay, that's going to allow the character to move a little slower? And
sometimes the movement is dictated by the puppet itself. If the mouth is very stiff, or if it's a very blocky, some puppets are very blocky. Some puppets are very tall and lanky. Some puppets have really easy mouths to work, and others only, their mouth can only open so far. So sometimes that dictates everything first. Sometimes you're shoehorning an idea into a puppet, and you're just trying to make it work. It depends, and it all comes from play. And so I always tell new puppeteers who haven't had a lot of camera time, if you've got a puppet on and the camera's up and we're not doing anything, play, see what it can do, see what you can make work. take the limitations and lean into the limitations. If you have a puppet that doesn't have a neck, well, then maybe that affects. Maybe
Wow.
they're going to talk more stiffly. Maybe
Yes.
the character's going to have a different cadence if it can't really, as opposed to like someone who's, really jazzy, has that real loose neck thing going on. Sometimes you really have to think on the fly, and I hate to use the term actor's toolbox, but it's apt. Use everything you have in that toolbox to make it work in that moment, especially if it's a one-off. If it's a long-running character, even that develops over time.
Yes.
Doing some of the characters on Don Quixote, Harriet Elizabeth Cow, which I specifically wanted to give a Pittsburgh dialect to because I grew up in Pittsburgh. Fred Rogers was shot in Pittsburgh. It's a very Pittsburgh-oriented group, and many of the actors on Fred Rogers had very thick dialects. Don Bronco especially. You'd say, "Hey, Fred, we're making snow pudding."
Wow.
I'm over here, Fred, making donuts. So I wanted to bring that to it, but the first time I did her, and I can look at that first episode with her, and then subsequent episodes, you sort of get into the groove a little. I was finding her just a little bit. Her tone is just a little more careful and higher in the first episode because I was auditioning her. But then later on, when I was approved, then you can just lean into it and have fun. So it's always important to try to find the fun of the character as quickly as you can. But especially with children's television, there are a lot of voices, there are a lot of opinions, there are a lot of inputs, whether that's from producers, research, writers, people really high up, people on the ground, and it's what makes it such a wonderfully collaborative world. But then sometimes if you're doing something new that's high stakes, as a performer, you don't want that performance to look like or to sound like you're walking on eggshells and making sure everybody's happy with it. So that's tricky as well to navigate those waters.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Because we had the same thing on Barney and Friends. Obviously, there's directors and choreographers and you name it.
Sure.
And there's several times, someone would ask, "Well, can you do this?
Right.
Jump a rope or roller skate." We did some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
They were like, "He's gonna say yes," and then, but I knew I had to prove it to people. Like I knew I'd have to go practice it and do the time and do the work because that wasn't always going to fly. And there were a few times where okay, we're going to pull this, things of that nature. So you do know when you say yes, you really actually have to be able to do it because.
Oh yeah. And you have to then also know what your limitations are and say.
Wow.
I hate feeling like I can't do something.
No.
All actors feel that way.
Right.
Well.
But at some point you have to say, well, I either say no now and have some sanity to it, or embarrass myself when it's proven that I can't do it while the cameras are rolling.
Right.
Depends on what those things are.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I had a couple that it was fun. Juggling. I said I could juggle, and and I think I pulled it off, but it wasn't a long take. Like I could do it 3 or 4 times.
That's impressive. So you only need so much. TV is good that way.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely.
You know what you can get away with.
So let's talk about that part of it, the puppeteer aspect of it. That was something that Matt Vogel talked a lot about. That was really difficult for him when he first got in. Having your hand up and looking at monitors and doing that aspect. What has that been like for you?
Well, when I was teaching myself in college, I tried to get as much out as possible, but then you're working with professionals, and now you've got people telling you, oh, this is wrong, and you weren't even thinking about that, or this, or this, or this, and they're helping you fine-tune it, fine-tune the craft, fine-tune the skill, things that you weren't even, remotely aware of. So that gets better over time, but then as you get older and more confident in your performance, your bones and muscles start to fight back a little bit as you're being cramped in these positions or making sure your head is out of the shot. And we've all, oh my goodness, that's the hardest part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the hardest part is just how difficult it can be on the body over time, and
Wow.
which makes what Carol Spinney did and Jerry did for so long into their careers that
Wow.
much more incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That Carol was roller skating in that bird, I believe, well into his early 70s, maybe. Can't think of the last time I saw him roller skate in the bird, but he must have been 70. I mean, that's astonishing that he did it at all, at any age.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He was fearless when it came to that bird and that grouch. He was fearless, and I love him for that.
Mm-hmm.
And he cared so much. I've never met anyone who loved what he did more than Carol.
Yes.
Because everybody, I think, has their moments of, the puppet's so heavy. Why do I have to have a puppet on? Can't I just do this in a voiceover? Can't I just do this in a booth? Oh, I wish I was doing this. Or, oh, I'm not making enough money. Or, and Carol, man, he would have done those beyond the grave if that technology was possible.
Mm-hmm.
When I met him that day, he was so nice. His wife was there as well.
Oh, and Debbie's so wonderful.
She was just as nice as he was.
Yeah.
And he was partly in costume, which kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
And as you know how this, so Barney has a voice that's with us as well, because there's two different. And then, we had PR with us, and then someone, a dresser as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so in between takes, everyone is talking to Carol. I mean, everyone wants to hear Carol's story.
Oh, and he's got them.
He does.
Wow.
He does have them. And everyone obviously is great at their jobs and all that stuff, but everyone forgot about me other than Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And Carol would continue to say, does Carrie need water? Or does Carrie need... And they didn't, by any means, they're the best. So it's
no, but
shot
I
on them.
understand. Yeah.
But that's what Carol was able to do. That's one of the things that blew me away is he just kept saying, "Is Carrie okay?" Yeah. They'd laugh. Oh my God, we gotta get.
I think that's something that happens in the fraternity of suit performers. I think that they know how to look out for their own. I think that if Doug Jones was there, he would have been the same. I think he would have wanted to make sure you were taken care of as well. I get the sense that is a very tight, not necessarily people who all know each other, but the shared experience really does go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Shared experience is important in this industry.
It is, and I worked with Noel.
Oh, no, sure, of course, Noel McNeil.
Yeah, Noel McNeil, and same thing.
Yeah.
We were both. He was like, "Is Carrie okay?" And I'm like,
Well, because they've all been there in that position where someone's forgotten about them or left them in too long.
Wow.
I mean, I've been in situations where you're put in a box or under the stairs, and after a while, they forget you're there, or they forget your hand is still in. If you're in a chair and you can't move, and they forget.
Yes.
Put my hand down.
Well, and do you think part of that is what you were exactly saying, is that you become the character so much?
Oh, they don't think anybody's under there. I mean, and that's the job.
Yes.
The biggest question.
In an aspect, there's a compliment to that, right?
The biggest question I was asked when I was doing Avenue Q was, do you ever forget that the puppet's not alive? And I would try to respond as magnanimously as possible. I am working too damn hard to forget that the puppet is alive.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a backhanded compliment because it meant that they honestly thought the puppet was doing the work.
Wow.
It wasn't so helpful when it came to trying to get jobs beyond Avenue Q because people thought, well, she's not a real actress. Puppet does it. There's just not a lot of. I had hoped that doing Avenue Q would and seeing showing the audience that there were people behind these characters.
Wow.
I had hoped that would bring more respect to the world.
Okay.
You know, to the puppeteer world, to the Muppet world, and sometimes I feel like it just did the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Like people just thought we were walking C-stands, and that these puppets were doing all the work, and we weren't really acting.
Exactly.
It's so strange, but that's the illusion of a great performance. You know,
Bam.
all the people who've done this for so long.
Mm-hmm.
When people believe that these characters are real and on their own, and don't even think about the person who's performed them. And but you know, it made me really angry when Jerry Nelson died, and I felt like his passing was. Oh, I got so angry. The New York Times didn't even run their own obituary for him. They ran the AP Wire story, and they didn't add anything to it. And I thought, my God, this guy deserves better. Look at all of the things he's done. Look at all his contributions. And they just couldn't see beyond. And I just did some puppets. You know, but they love the characters.
Right.
If you were to say the Count died, people would be, oh my God. You know, but no, that they, you know.
Well, I do, and it's really interesting because I'm pretty sure I saw you. I've seen Avenue Q, and actually the gentleman that was doing the voice of Barney at the time, we were in New York. We went to see the show.
Oh wow!
My jaw was dropped, and it's funny because all the things you thought that you would be recognized for, that's exactly what I saw because I knew how difficult it was. Right? Because you're out there on stage with the puppet.
Yeah.
And you're working your tail off from the singing aspect to the performing aspect, and now me, probably because I've been doing this for as long as I had, I'm watching both, right? So I'm absolutely watching you, but I'm also watching the puppet.
Yeah, we I think Rick Lyon coined the term that our faces became sort of subtitles for the puppets. It was a very happy accident the way that all happened. When we were doing our first readings, the show was initially conceived as a television show.
Yes.
And because it was being staged as a stage reading, we're like, well, we don't have to hide the puppeteers. So we were all on music stands the way you would do any musical staged reading. And afterwards, people said, what a bold, creative decision it was to show the faces of the puppeteers. It really helped. And everyone said, thank you. And what we realized with this kind of puppetry, we are so used to that camera lens, that camera lens is our world. And if the puppet uses that camera lens to portray all the emotions, you know, rising a little above it to have thoughtfulness and a little below it for pensiveness or sadness, and you know, you realize after a time, well, in a theater there are hundreds of different camera lenses. So our faces became an important way to fill in the blanks. A deadpan puppet can be many things.
Yes.
It can be thinking, it can be stewing, it can be content, it can be, you know, deadpan Jack Benny reaction.
Yes.
Our faces helped fill in exactly what that was. And when we were staging the show at the Vineyard Theater, the first time we had done it without music stands, there was a question: where should my face look in relation to Kate's? We knew that the puppet had to be down here rather than up here, and we had deemed that we had made that decision during the stage readings because we wanted to be able to look at the human actors who were with us.
Yes.
So we knew that eye line had to match the human actor's eye line, the Brian and the Christmas Eve and the Gary Coleman. So we knew we wouldn't be up here. So being here, well, where would I look at Kate? Well, I realized when I was doing the readings, by that time I'd memorized the songs. You know, the script, where we would mostly be looking is at the scripts. But during the songs, I'd had those memorized. So I started to look at Kate. Two things happened. One, I felt very closed off from the audience by looking at Kate. I just felt like there were suddenly a wall went up. And the other thing that happened is I realized this relationship looks like a ventriloquist's relationship. Where I'm looking at Kate, you expect Kate to turn back and start talking to Stephanie.
Yes.
As opposed to, if I'm mirroring what Kate is doing, suddenly both of our faces become this one character. That I am supporting this character rather than making you pretending that I'm not here. And that was sort of a happy accident as well.
Yes.
Because when puppeteers are seen in live theater, doing tabletop or bunraku, sometimes they have black hoods on to hide their faces. Sometimes, as with the Lion King, their faces are painted to sort of match the character.
Even though the Lion King came out in 1994, you know, it's just that Lion King it's a Disney classic from James Earl Jones to Disney actors like Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who was going out to do Tommy Huck at the time. Matthew Broderick, who was the adult Simba, Jeremy Allen, and so forth. And they did the live, and then nearly 25 years later, over 25 years later, came the live action Lion King. And yeah, good thing you mentioned it, Stephanie. Continue on.
We weren't doing that per se. We were wearing muted colors, but we weren't pretending to have that bunraku style of costume and makeup or hoods. And that became a style of performing, which, again, when I signed up to do that first reading, I didn't know that was how it was going to end up. Bobby and Jeff had met my husband, Craig Shemin, who was working for the Henson Company at the time. Now he's the president of the Jim Henson Legacy, and they were looking for someone to do this reading, and he recommended me. And Rick Lyon had also thought of me, but he thought I'd be too busy to do the reading. So it's a good thing they met Craig, otherwise I would have missed out.
Isn't it crazy how that stuff?
Always ask. That's the question. If you think someone will say no, ask them anyway.
Right.
Wow.
And if they say no, you've lost nothing. And if they say yes, hey, bonus.
Right.
Wow.
They might say yes. They might not be as employed as you think they are. Which was the case with me at the time. Yeah.
Right. Were you all nervous when you first go in front of these crowds, going, how is the reaction to this going to be?
I mean, we were having fun.
Okay.
We were enjoying the show. So that's half the battle. I've done some other shows, new work since then, new readings or workshops or festival shows, and of varying quality. And when you're doing something that's not there. Well, we knew this was something that at least we were having a good time with. And early audiences really, there were different reactions. The first Wednesday matinee at the Vineyard, oh my goodness, because you had a lot of little old subscription biddies. Now, that didn't mean we had crickets, but it was a more muted response. But then sometimes you just get these wild responses, and hearing and we had a little of that in those staged readings as well. Those were public readings at the York Theater.
Yeah.
And obviously they were good enough reactions to convince Bobby and Jeff that this should be a stage show and not a television series.
No.
So it wasn't so much nervousness. I mean, when you do theater, you know that pretty much all you can do is serve it up as best you can. I would love to be smart enough to pursue a sociology degree or do a sociology thesis about audiences.
As you mentioned, stage show, yes, I agree. And it would have been a television series, as you mentioned earlier, but, and just the fact is it's good enough. Continue on.
I'm convinced over my time at Avenue Q, and again, I wish I'd been smart enough to chart this, that I think barometric pressure has something to do with it. I think weather has something to do with audience reaction. Not, again, there's always subjectivity of the quality of a show, but I'm talking about a show that's a hit. A show that is has gotten good reviews, and for the most part people like. Night to night, you don't know what that audience is going to be like. So if you've ever done live theater, is it great when they laugh when they're supposed to laugh? Of course. But I don't think anyone was going to come and boo us. So at least they weren't going to pay to boo us.
Well, but it a lot of times, because I've gone to Broadway shows where you don't know exactly what you're going to see, right?
Oh, sure.
Mhm.
So you're
And they
hearing
were a
all.
hard
Wow.
show to describe too.
Yeah, these are
so-
puppets that
Yeah.
cut. I mean, it's an adult. It's an adult show,
Wow.
Yeah.
and it's so much more than just that, right? There's a lot of lessons
Yeah.
and a lot of things that are happening on with this show.
That was I think the biggest challenge was trying to describe the show, especially when
Wow.
we were doing press early on, is trying to come up with that capsule description because everyone's like, well, it's a grown-up Sesame Street.
Wow.
It really wasn't.
Right.
It really wasn't. It was much more of a traditional book musical than anybody gave it credit for. I mean, you look at the script, it's boy comes to the big city, meets girl, falls in love, breaks up,
Wow.
maybe ever after.
Mm.
And but then it's also got elements of, we had the Red producers with us. It's got elements of a lot of 20-somethings trying to figure out who they are in this new world of freedom that they have.
Mhm.
It's just that it was told with a different tool.
Mm.
And a tool that could do things that humans couldn't. And that's the long tradition of puppetry. That goes back to Punch and Judy. The puppets
Wow.
can get away with saying things and doing things that would get a human hanged. They can criticize their kings and they can make fun. They're the court jesters, and that's okay.
Yes.
The puppet says it. And then to call us a show where it's just puppets cursing was a disservice as well. I mean, yes, it was a show that had puppets that cursed, but that wasn't all that it was. And I wouldn't have wanted to do a show that was just about puppets cursing. Because also, to me, the puppets aren't puppets, they're characters.
Yes.
That happen to be presented in puppet form. And I think that people who saw the show eventually came to understand that. But another thing I would hear at the stage door is, I hate puppets, I hate musicals, my friend dragged me here kicking and screaming, but I loved the show.
Wow.
So, when you're charging $100 a ticket at that time for a Broadway show, when people thought, well, I can just watch Muppets at home,
Mhm.
it was a tough sell at first. That's why we were very grateful to be nominated for the Tony, because at least we could perform on the telecast. That 3-minute performance encapsulates, it gives you a better taste of what the show is.
Mhm.
I don't envy the Spotco, who are our advertising people. I mean, they did a lot of different campaigns over the years.
Yes.
It's a tough. We were a very word of mouth show. And we were very grateful to the people who came early on and dragged those friends kicking and screaming.
Well, and then you were nominated for it.
Uh-huh.
The show was nominated, and I was nominated, and Johnny was nominated, and the book and the music also won.
So, I mean, what is that from going to do a reading? I think I'm doing a TV show to getting nominated for a Tony for this show.
Yeah.
I was just lucky. I was just lucky. I mean, there's just no other word. I often say I don't think I would have gotten cast if I'd auditioned for it in a traditional way. Because I was playing an ingenue, but I wasn't an ingenue. And I look at the women who were put into the show after I left, and they were all younger and prettier and much more ingenue than me. Even, also playing Lucy. They went for that ingenue look, and that's not me. So I was lucky to get in the show, stay in the show, continue to stay in the show once we got to Broadway. I mean, to actually, it's my only Broadway credit, but
Yes.
I'm lucky that it's a memorable one. I'm lucky that people thought I was noticeable enough. But then you look at that category, and I don't know whether you looked at the other women who were nominated that year. I was pretty much laughed out of that category. So it was lovely, but it was very bittersweet. You had Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel for Wicked. You had Donna Murphy for Wonderful Town, and the great Tanya Pinkins. It's not just Tanya Pinkins; it's the great Tanya Pinkins for Caroline or Change. So, I mean, and then And I was self-deprecating about it. I called myself and the rest because I was the professor and Marianne. I did that. Unfortunately, you know, the rest of the community, you know, did as well, and it was bittersweet because I was made to feel like I had lost it before I lost it.
Mm.
But I look back at that time with a great deal of, you know what, I got to go to the party, and I never thought I'd get to do that. But I mention that only because I think that there are, especially the, you know, the young theater kids out there, they think, well, you get on Broadway and you get a Tony nomination and the rest of your life is gravy, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, this is a tough biz, kids.
Yes.
People can be mean.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for no good reason. I didn't kill anyone's dog. I didn't do anything wrong. I just, you know, performed a puppet that people thought was an easy performance. And again, I did not have the name recognition of these incredible women. And you can talk about talent. I'm not going to compare myself to them on that level because I'm very cowed by all their abilities. It was just, you know, everybody else gets the time to be a nominee, and you haven't lost yet. Twice the New York Times called me the Dennis Kucinich of the leading actress Tony race. So
Yes.
that's on the public record until the day I die. Hopefully that won't wind up in my obituary. But if the New York Times decides to just pull it from the AP wire, then maybe I've come off okay.
Wow.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know. I'm lucky to have got to sit at that table for any length of time. And I was lucky to be able to be in it for 2.5 years, to leave on my own terms. You know, the show didn't, we thought the show would maybe last a few months. We were lucky to stay open. And then the fact that this is a show that people remember, that we got the cast recording, that's not a guarantee. It certainly wasn't a guarantee in 2003, maybe more now, but back then. So,
well, and they do more than remember the show. I mean, the show is very important. It really is.
I can also appreciate the kids who reach out if they're doing high school and college productions of the show. I think it's amazing. Because when you're working on something in development, you don't think about that. You're not thinking about this show is going to make history and Samuel French will distribute, or MTI will distribute it. You're not thinking in terms of that.
No.
You're just like, okay, how long will I have this gig for?
Right.
Will I get enough to make health insurance? I mean, you know, and am I having a good time? And I was really lucky that we were having a good time with a really good group of people. And that's not always a given.
Wow.
No, it's not.
It's not. No.
Stephanie, I can't. I could sit and talk to you all day.
No, I go on, as you are clearly aware of now.
No, well, I love it. It's so fascinating to me. Obviously, being in the industry and all of those aspects of it, and you really, it's just amazing what all you've done in your career so far.
Again, I've been really lucky. I've been lucky that people have given me opportunities and believed in me and just let me be a sizable ham, which is what I love to do.
Well, and I gotta, because we talked about it at the beginning. I gotta get this in before we finish up here, which is REM. I know that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But things like that are so cool.
That was lucky as well. So when we found out, and Matt Vogel was in that bit as well, when we found out that REM was going to be on Sesame Street, there was a segment of Sesame Street at that time called The Daycare Monsters, and Matt,
which I have not seen. Continue on.
and I were 2 of the 4 daycare monsters. I think Joey Mazzarino and who was the other one? Oh, Jim Martin, I think, were the daycare monsters, and we were going to be in the bit with REM, and we were so excited. And then Danette DeSena, who was the talent coordinator at the time, came up to me a couple days later and said, "You know that lady who sings a song with them, that Kate Pierce? Do you think you could sing like?" And she didn't even get the rest of the sentence out. I'm just like, yes. I mean, I didn't know if, again, to your point, I didn't know if I could. I hadn't tried. Although I guess I'd sung karaoke. I'd sung a lot of B-52's karaoke, so maybe I thought I could get away with it. But yeah, I leapt at it. And what I didn't know, I just assumed that I would pre-record everything. But what I didn't know is that morning, I I would pre-record it with Mike Mills and Michael Stipe, all in one room.
Wow.
That was the experience. And I mean, I didn't have a camera with me. I was coming down with a terrible cold. It was a blur. I got them to autograph some CDs, but like I didn't gush. I was really trying to play it cool, and I didn't gush as much as I should have or could have. Yeah, being on antihistamines that day made it very all fuzzy, but what an amazing experience. And they were wonderful. And they, you know, it was a song that notoriously they had not performed in concert since they had recorded it. The rumor was, you know, they didn't like the song, but Kate Pearson wasn't on tour with them.
Right.
They didn't have that other voice. So I had heard
Oh, Monster Daycare. Yeah, I've seen those. Never mind. Continue on.
it more recently than they had. So when we were in the control room before we went to record, and Michael and Mike were sitting there like, wait, do I come in here? Wait, is this bit? I'm just trying to not say, yeah, you sing that and you sing that. Because, you know, be cool. Be cool, DeBruzo. Be cool. That was 1998. That was a lifetime ago.
Oh, yeah, that scene. Okay, never mind. I was only 3. Continue on.
But, you know, and I'm again very grateful that that's something that people still remember fondly. But see, because I was a daycare monster now, I don't know if everybody knows this. I didn't get to perform the puppet of Kate
Oh, I didn't know
Pearson.
that.
No, Kevin Clash, who played Elmo, who's technically, you know, my boss as puppet captain, said, I'm going to play this because you already have a character in it, so I'm going to lip sync to it. Because the puppet's really heavy and big with that big wig. And okay, at least I'm still in it. Like, I couldn't complain. What am I going to complain? Like, I get to sing with REM, and I get to be in the bit. The rest of it is just technicalities.
Right.
So that's a bit of trivia as well. I'm the little green monster just, you know, going nuts back and forth in the front, being all silly. So yes, and if you hear me go, you know, making the noises, I'm on it twice. So yeah, sometimes you get lucky to get to do stuff like that.
Yes.
And I'm very grateful that that's something that people still remember. What, 22 years later with fondness? That's amazing.
Well,
And that happened really early. I mean, I started at Sesame in '93. That's 5 years into my career at Sesame.
Yeah.
So how lucky was I to even get to do it? Yeah.
well, you've had just an amazing career so far, and we can't wait to see what comes next. And the
I'm glad you
helpsters-
say so far. That's always nice.
Oh, absolutely. That's always my, who knows what, I didn't ever think I'd be doing this, and it's turned out into something I just love, and who knows where's next. So you've just had these really cool moments in your career, and I can't wait to see what happens next. And the Helpsters on Apple TV, you got to check that out. That's been a huge hit.
Yes.
You know, we have no idea what numbers are because streaming, they keep that pretty close to the vest. But we have a good time. And Don Quixote on PBS,
Absolutely.
we have a good time. And sadly, I haven't been able to be out for that as much. That tape's in Chicago. So unfortunately, I've had to loop to Mel Campbell's puppet performance quite a bit. But when I was out there, oh man, the fun that we have. It's a good group. Again, Spiffy Pictures. I love working with David and Adam Redman. They're good. They're good people. So
Yes.
really lucky.
Well, I can't thank you for your time. I just had a blast talking to you.
I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the chat.
Well, thank you, and I may have to call you back sometime, and we'll plan it out because I'd love to talk to you even more about all this.
That sounds good.
And thank you for watching Purple Roads. Remember to keep your eyes, ears, and heart open, and you'll find your Purple Road. We'll see you next week.
So that was Parodes, episode number 97. Susanna, these Ronald, something like that, from Helpsters and Prairie Dawn and other things. What do I think about this episode? I think it was amazing, and so far, this episode and other things was a success, and other things like that. Excuse me. That was LJPCBM episode number 1134. Hope you enjoy it. Coming up next, there will be a brand new episode of Lunchtime LJPCBM episode number 633. and then there will be 2 brand new episodes of FWL. But stay tuned for the next one, which is going to be Roads episode number 98, which is going to be my reaction video to, let's just say, Stan Tucker, the area of a very airy library. Till next time, through Jones and Papa so baby, good morning, reaction so say out. See ya.
Given unto me this life I'll never take for granted, and given all the time I failed to really understand it, I never sought to meet the maker of reality, the one who gave the life that which is always happening, but I tried all the time. I ask, why me? Why was I the one to see things as I do under the moonlight and the sun? Perception is the question, and the giver holds the key.